welcome to the LUMA Institute's inaugural How Might We event, a discussion with women in the design field. My name is Elaina Carpino, and I'm Chief Operations Officer of the LUMA Institute. And I just want to share how humbling it is to be in the company of such amazingly talented women in the design field. First, a little bit about me. I'm an engineer by trade, certainly someone in the STEM field with 20 years of experience in corporations over the past many years. And I'm so excited to be here with all of you at LUMA. I'm a natural problem solver, a heart-led leader, and certainly a human-centered design practitioner. So thank you for joining us with this extremely important discussion in honor of Women's History Month. As a reminder for all of you, we are recording this event so that we can archive it and share it later. So first, a little bit about LUMA. We believe in the power of design to make things better, and we are constantly pursuing our goal of universal design literacy. For more than a decade, we have empowered individuals, teams, and organizations to be more creative, collaborative, and effective. And during the last 10 years, people all over the world working in nearly every field have used the LUMA system of innovation to look at challenges in new ways, understand their nuances, and of course, make things better. But our aspiration is greater, and it's to equip people everywhere to be confident and capable designers doing their best, most inspiring work. So let's talk about this event series. And as a company built on human-centered design beliefs and values, we view diversity, equity, and inclusion as sources of strength and inspiration. We are inspired most by the humans at the heart of human-centered design, which is why we are investing more energy into growing, nurturing, and stewarding our LUMA community. And what's exciting about today is that it marks the very first in a series that begins to explore how the LUMA community is working to make things better all over the world. So we start with this discussion about women in the design field. And in the months ahead, we'll continue to gather to explore how design thinking and human-centered design intersect with other topics that matter to all of you. All right, so let's get into it. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you LUMA's Director of People Experience and Workforce Diversity. And as today's facilitator, Carissa Lucky. Please join me in welcoming Carissa.
Thank you so much, Elaina. I am so excited to be here and dive into this conversation with these amazing women. So we do have some members of the LUMA team monitoring the chat Q&A as an FYI, so please feel free to share your thoughts as we go along. Just a little bit about me. As Elaina said, I'm the Director of People Experience and Workforce Design here at LUMA Institute. I have found that human-centered design thinking practices are a core element of developing the people experience within an organization. And I am extremely excited to continue the conversation surrounding women in this great industry with all of you. So to start today's discussion, I'd like to ask each of you to introduce yourselves, each of our panelists to introduce themselves. And as they do so, they'll share a picture that is emblematic of their journey in design as a human-centered designer. We'll share the picture as you speak, take about 2 minutes and tell us the story of this picture. So I'd like to start with Ashley Jablow.
Hi, thank you so much, Carissa. Thank you so much, everyone. Gosh, I'm always happy to be here with my fellow Lumatics and with all of you. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Ashley Jablow. I'm a designer, facilitator, coach, wearer of many hats. My business is called Wayfinders Collective, and I help people and teams create a work life that they love. For teams, that often looks like facilitation. How are we going to work together, designing those conversations? And for individuals, it's often coaching. Who do I want to be when I grow up? And as you can see here, I've got my littlest designer in the family, my son Eli. This is a picture from a number of years ago. He's actually almost as tall as me at this point. When I was doing a design research project as a Presidential Innovation Fellow at the White House, and it was Take Your Child to Work Day. So I introduced him to Post-it notes very early. But I chose this photo because I think in many ways my experience and my work as a practitioner of human-centered design really dovetails and lines very nicely with my story and experience growing into motherhood and growing into now being the person that I am. I started my career in the world of design at the innovation consultancy IDEO. And knew nothing about the world that I was entering into at that point. I kind of joke, I entered through a side door and they let me in even though I knew nothing. And in many ways that, gosh, if that isn't the story of parenthood and adulting in general, I don't know what is. So when I think about my growth as a human-centered designer, I think about my growth as a person, as a mother, and I work every day to raise a little human who I want to grow up to live these methods and mindsets as well. So I'm very excited to be here with all of you today, and thank you. Oh, Chris, I think you're muted. There you go.
Yep. Thank you, Ashley. What a great story and what a great way to pass the knowledge down, right, of human-centered design and how the next generation can use it. So thank you. I'd like to jump over to Aubrey. Aubrey, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Carissa and Ashley. I don't know how I'm going to follow that. You have such a great story. So hi, everyone. My name is Aubrey Killian, and I am the Senior Manager of our Client Enablement team here at LUMA. The picture that you're going to see is actually a little comic sketch that I was just doing for myself about like 2 years ago when I was reflecting on how I got to the LUMA Institute. And actually started to learn about human-centered design. So my story, I think, kind of starts in college at the University of Pittsburgh, where I was studying architecture. And something that we really focused on there was architectural theory. So the theory classes really helped me build empathy for the different types of people that we were designing our spaces for. Who would be occupying the space? How would they be experiencing it? And to design for all needs and not just one demographic. So at that time, I didn't really know that human-centered design was a practice, but I think as I started to look back at my career, I might have been practicing it longer than I thought. So from there, I actually went to a few different industries, and I worked at a hotel and hospitality. I worked for information technology at an online school. And then I went back to architecture to work at a materials and production company. So I feel like I was gaining a lot of different perspectives at all these different industries. And I was learning that design isn't always just something that you see on paper or art, right? So I really was understanding that design comes in a lot of different forms. And, for instance, process is a huge thing that people design in every single company. So that's, I think, like where my design journey had gone. And I ended up at LUMA, and I'm continuing to learn more how to harness what I've learned through all of this experience into a daily practice, and just kind of use it to help make things better with my friends, my family, my amazing colleagues, and our clients. And I'm excited to learn more.
I think that's a fabulous story, Aubrey. It just really speaks to how human-centered design is really integrated in all facets of our life, right? Even when we're unaware, we're there. It's there. So let's jump over to Caitlin. Caitlin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hey, I'm Caitlin Silverstein. My picture is actually from about 10 years ago. It's a picture of my team. And we were heading into a fish processing plant. So the three kind of main takeaways here. One, I wore the completely wrong shoes. I was in canvas shoes, which was a horrible idea. Threw those away after. The second one, I think this reminds me that design is a team sport, and that all of us in this research, all of us brought our perspective, not just to what we saw and then could take away and come up with, but we all looked differently at what we saw. So it was important to have all of us there with each of our sources of strength to kind of have that lens and absorb the information we got from the fish plant. It also showcases Kristen Heist, who's next to me there. She's kind of third from the left, who's an incredible woman in design and design mentor I've had. So she was the one who taught me a lot about what questions to ask, how to approach going into the field. I think, you know, in the spirit of kind of lifting each other up, Kristen's done that for me a lot. So excited to be here at LUMA now and teach people how to go look at fish plants if the need arises.
That's a great and funny story, Caitlin. I'd be excited to hear more about that, but thank you. So we'll jump over to Hannah. Hannah, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, thank you for having me. I always feel very at home when I'm around the LUMA family, and I really attribute my skills and change in my career direction to my exposure to LUMA and your tools and methods. And so I've actually been in management consulting for most of my life, and these tools are not part of the standard kit that management consultants have. So when I was first exposed to them, I could immediately tell that these could really offer so much to my own practice and to the work that I was doing with clients. So I immediately integrated this work into my own work and ultimately left the, I'll say confines, because it really felt that way, of my management consulting company and started my own company. And what I do is I help my clients integrate design thinking into their work. Sometimes it's formal instruction, often it's just weaving it into their projects and programs. And the picture you're looking at is some work that I did with some women who are based in Israel. They're all leading organizational effectiveness consultants. And they found out about me through a college roommate of mine who I had met when I was in Israel. And so I exposed them to these LUMA tools and methods. I used the mural system to do it across time zones. For them, the session was from 8 to 10:30 p.m. That was when they wanted it, after they put their children to bed. And we had this incredible experience of mixed languages and mixed tools and methods and discussion. And so this for me represents how LUMA and design thinking and this way of working can help tie together, at least for me, so many different aspects of my life and my experience. So I'm very happy to be here and excited to learn from all of you.
Absolutely fabulous. Thank you, Hannah. That really does tie into how design thinking or human-centered design thinking translates across all demographics, all genders, and really kind of can tie in the diversity aspect there as far as being a human-centered designer. Terri, let's jump over to you. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, hello everyone. So my name is Terri Burch and I am a LUMA instructor. And I've had the privilege of working in human-centered design for about 7 years now. And so my image here represents a really important milestone in my career. So my background is in design, strategy, and facilitation. And I got the bulk of that experience through a consultancy that I started by accident. So I went to grad school in Philadelphia and I studied strategic design. And during that time, there really wasn't opportunities where I could find to work in design the way that I wanted. And so I started doing some contract work in at a marketing agency in the greater New York area. And then it just turned into more consulting opportunities and folks asking me to do work. And I started consulting. It's like, I guess I'm a consultant now. And so this image, it's a little kind of goofy, but funny. So my jazz hands is representing 5 years. And in the business world, you know, when you can get past 5 years, it's a good milestone, because that means that, you know, you're doing something right. So I wanted to give it all that I had for 5 years, and we made it there. So I invited folks who had either attended my workshops or that I had consulted with in some way, maybe through their organization, or had some type of personal connection with, to celebrate with me and to take this little photo shoot. And so it just reminds me that we made it to those 5 years. And it was also at that time that, you know, I started to think about, one, it let me know that I was in the right place. It was validation for me that, oh, I'm doing something right, and that people value design. It also helped me to think about ways that I could, at that point, I wanted to pivot, like, how can I impact more people? And that's actually how I found LUMA. It was, I really just aligned with LUMA's mission of universal design literacy at the right time. And so super excited to be here and to be a part of this conversation with you guys.
Thank you, Terri. That is, it's always a great thing when you find your passion and your purpose aligned with the organization that you're part of. So definitely excited to hear that. So to kick off our discussion, I'd like to know, and Terri, since we ended with you, let's start with you. How do you think we might create a future? Like, how might we create a future that honors the unique talents that women possess? And then how can we amplify those voices as far as human-centered design is concerned?
Well, I think, first of all, doing more events like this. You know, I'm super excited to be here and to do this with you guys. I was like, this is needed. So thank you for everyone who's been a part of putting this event together. So having opportunities to elevate women's voices and having events to discuss. I think also within my own sort of world of instruction and as an educator, and maybe this applies to other design leaders as well, but I think we can do a better job at including resources and references and books from women, right? When I first started design, it was all about, you know, Tim Brown and David Kelly and all these male references, which they've contributed, you know, really well to design. But we know that women have contributed just as much, right? So I think one of the things that can help us to elevate women's voices is to use references from women. And I challenge myself to do that all the time when in my teaching, for sure. So I think that's a start for sure. And I think I have in my notes, like, stop mansplaining. So I think this is about, like, calling out when women's voices are not being heard, right? Saying something about it when you feel like you're, you know, there's an issue in your work, then calling it out and using design to do that.
Excellent points. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add to that? I think Terri brought up some excellent points as far as resources, as far as mansplaining is actually, a big deal. And I would think so within our industry as well as women. Anyone else have anything to add?
I think I want to just add, one thing in terms of when we start with women. So I have an 11-year-old daughter. And she can actually get her design thinking badge in her Girl Scout troop. So I'm always so happy to see how this kind of literacy can start so early. In fact, behind me, this is not a background, this is real, because these are design thinking exercises that we do in our family. And I think for young women and girls, what I love so much about this way of working is the fact that it supports their innate way of being in the world. Women and girls are bold. They know they need to try new things all the time, and they're open to making mistakes. And this is a forgiving space where trying things and making mistakes is accepted and allowed. And at the same time, it also plays into our more nurturing side. This is about getting people together, about having workshops when we're in our analog world again. Nobody ever goes hungry in my workshops, I'll tell you. So I think there's a lot about us as women that just naturally fits. We can be intelligent, we can be bold, we can be nurturing. It's all part of this way of being in the world. So I really see it as a universal thing that we owe it to our younger generation to share and teach.
Absolutely, I agree.
I think too, the way design is, it invites and it encourages the question, am I getting all the perspectives I need? And asking that, and whether it's gender or race or, you know, whatever it may be, am I getting all the perspectives I need? And sometimes that's not true. So stakeholder mapping helps you think about all the different perspectives you could use or sort of as inputs into your work. So that I would just add that on.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carissa. I had in my notes something about stakeholder mapping as well. So yeah, I was just gonna say present day, invite us to the table, right? Like we have a lot of ideas, and I think that, like Terri was saying, they might not always be heard. So we need both men and women who already do have that seat to invite more women to the table. And, you know, stakeholder mapping helps you really lay out the different perspectives that you need to hear from. And diversity on a project team, whether it be race, gender, age, or something else, will really help you achieve an outcome that speaks to everyone. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, I think, you know, recognition is a really big theme that I've heard throughout my career. So, like, how do we amplify the voices of women in the workforce? How about we celebrate them and let them know that they're doing great things and really acknowledge their accomplishments. And I think that, you know, we as women should share our own stories, but also share the stories of other women as well. So celebrating each other. And then if men can hop on board and help with that, hopefully more will follow suit.
So that's a good segue into my next question has to do with how might we, or in what ways can human-centered design actually be used to help fight gender bias? So when we think about that, are there specific tools, or how can we use or leverage, you know, human-centered design to combat that? So I'll jump over to Ashley. Ashley?
Yeah, I was going to say, I have thoughts. And I just have to say, I love that, like, lunatics through and through, we're already thinking about, like, what methods would we use, and, like, what's the recipe pairing, right? So you know, your question, Carissa, you know, how might we use human-centered design to fight gender bias, or like building on our last question, to bring more women into these conversations? You know, my first answer really is to equip everyone, like literally everyone, with the mindsets and methods of human-centered design. You know, I think about every time I have the opportunity to teach with LUMA or in other work, you know, I love to stress the point that practicing human-centered design isn't just about putting new tools in your toolkit. It's actually about growing into, I think, a better human being, right? The values and the behaviors around inclusion, around collaboration, around empathy. You know, it's almost as if once you see these things, once you're exposed to this way of working, collaborating, being, it's really hard to unsee it, right? And so I really truly believe that the more people, and I think our introductions showed it, you don't have to have formal training, right? But exposure and practice with this way of working really does make it so that you're compelled. You can't not invite everyone to the table, right? So that's my first, like, operating principle, is this isn't just about, like, how to do work better, but it's actually about how to be, you know, in community, in work, in relationship with others better. So get more people trained and exposed. That's my answer.
Can I build on what Ashley's saying on this whole notion of getting trained? So often when I talk to people about this way of working, it's true that you can sit in a workshop, or you can maybe watch a video and you'll know what design thinking is, but there aren't actually that many people yet. There is in this world, because we do this for a living, but when you look outside of our world, there aren't that many people who have the deep skills and capabilities to really facilitate a full day workshop or a week-long sprint, or to demonstrate that skill. And I think that for women who are interested in this work, my advice to them is really to take the time and go deep and really learn how to do it. Because when you learn how to do it, especially in our remote world, and you pair it with tools like Mural, you become the magician. You become the person who can do something that nobody else can do. I had a workshop this morning with 20 people from Singapore to goodness knows where, using Mural and LUMA tools in a way that other people can't do yet. I'm happy to teach it, but if we as women, I know sometimes we have to work a little bit harder to stand out, and this is the way of the world, but when we demonstrate that skill, we're untouchable. And I think that for people who hear and see this, I would encourage people to go deep and to do the courses and to practice and be bold and be prepared to fail, because it's a non-trivial skill set at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Building on that too, I think by nature, the work builds in feedback. I mean, if you're doing it well, right? Feedback, this worked, this didn't, right? The idea of iteration. And it gives you a chance to know what you're good at. So beyond being a woman, you know, what kind of thinker am I? Am I a big picture thinker, or am I a detailed thinker? Am I, you know, do I love the research phase, or am I more focused on solutions or excited about solutions? And so I think just kind of spending more time iterating and practicing the behaviors and methods gives you a chance to get to know yourself better too. So that when you are asking kind of what perspectives are needed, it's more than just demographic questions. It's like, oh, we need a big picture thinker in here, or we need somebody who's great at coming up with ideas, or you sort of move beyond those demographics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if I may just plus one to that, I love how the methods and the mindsets of design are coming out, right? So empathy and being collaborative and inclusive, right, is what design methods help us to do. I want to do a quick plug for our recipes that are on LUMA Workplace that many of us contributed to, that are under diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So we have some real world examples of ways to unpack biases and different ways of thinking so that we can have these challenging conversations sometimes, for sure. So that's a good starting place.
Absolutely. This is great information. And I'm getting some great feedback from our attendees too, that all of this information is greatly appreciated. So thank you. So Aubrey spoke to this a little bit a while, earlier in the conversation, but how else can we use design thinking to combat, and you feel free to speak to any specific challenges that you feel you faced in the workplace as a woman, and if you've implemented human-centered design thinking or tools to combat that, and if not, could there be a way we could use that to face those challenges?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So actually, Terri pointed to something that I had going on in my mind while you asked the first question, the recipes around diversity, equity, and inclusion. There is something around journaling, so kind of reflecting on the experiences that you've had in your life, and then taking that content and kind of understanding the roses, thorns, and buds. And for those of you who don't know what those are, identifying positives, negatives, and areas of opportunity in those experiences. And that would really help you identify your challenges. And from there, I think exploring it further by asking yourself the questions like, what are the causes of these challenges? Why are these happening? And what are the effects? That's a problem tree. That's another method that we have. So when you identify the answers to those questions, you can kind of begin to sketch a solution and share the outcome with key stakeholders. And I think the visuals can really help others understand not only what you as a woman would need to succeed, but also what the business itself needs to succeed and do better.
Thank you.
I think the other thing that I would add is when you find yourself in a pickle at work or in a situation where you have a challenge, design thinking is there to help you deal with a complex challenge. And what I found is when I'm faced with these more daunting situations, instead of feeling like I need to have an answer straight away or I know exactly what the problem is, I can relax into the problem space and say, what's really going on here? And I know there's a way out of this. I just haven't figured out how to find it yet. What tool do I need? And when I was training somebody recently who was a young consultant, she said to me, you know, the thing I feel most after learning design thinking is a sense of relief that I will be able to figure this out because I'm going to be able to try different things. I'm going to be able to get help from other people. So it feels less like your world is closing in on you and a little bit more like, well, this must be a doorway to something else and I just need to figure it out. So I think it helps with optimism that way.
I think if I could add one more thing, Hannah, you sparked a thought for me, and that is the kind of the elephant in the room, I guess, is ambiguity, right? Whether it's problem solving, like how do we get more women at the table, so to speak, or what do I want to do with my life, right? These complex challenges require us to just sit in the discomfort of that ambiguity. And that's one of the things, just like you said, Hannah, that's why I love human-centered design so much, because it's sort of like a backstop that I can lean against. And like you said, just sort of sit in the problem space without rushing to solutions. So I think everyone needs to become a champion at managing their own discomfort and ambiguity, because there's plenty of it around us in the world, that's for sure.
So to piggyback on that, Ashley, we had a great question from one of our attendees. What are some really great first steps or resources that you all would suggest in really learning how to do it and really learning how to apply human-centered design? So I'll jump into, let's talk with Caitlin. Caitlin.
First steps for learning human-centered design. I guess there are certainly methods, as we've talked about, that the LUMA system has in it, but I also think there's something about the behaviors that sort of live next to the method. So being collaborative, being visual, being iterative. I'll send a list as a follow-up. But the idea is that, you know, how can I lean into any one of those behaviors? And Ashley, you mentioned being a mom. I have this going on with my son now. He's very questioning. And so he's 3. So more questioning than I was ready for as a mom. So I think it's not only kind of what are the activities I can learn by way of methods, but also how do I get comfortable with some of these behaviors? We hear from everybody who participates in workshops, I can't draw. How do you start? And as you're learning these skills, they are skills, they're new skills. So be patient with yourself, look to others that are doing it in a way you admire and ask for help.
Thank you. That is insightful. And it's very true around applying it to dealing with children. I have that same experience, lots of questions, but leaning into those behaviors is definitely key.
Yeah, I have another resource that I've used design thinking mostly for my life. And in reflecting on design and how I use it in business, I realized I was like, I've always been a designer. Like this, some of these things aren't as new to me, but now I have a language for it. And when I was looking to like pivot and shift my career, one of the books that really helped me do that is called Design the Life That You Love, or Design the Life That You Love. And it's by a woman. Ayse is how you pronounce her name, A-Y-S-E, Berson. And she was a traditional industrial designer, but she used industrial design to apply to your life and unpacking your life. And I think it aligns really nicely with the way that we've been talking about design, that it is for work, but it's also for your personal life and how to apply it. So that's a resource. And then certainly, what's Tim Brown's book is that Change by Design, right? It's just got a 10-year update. So that's a nice kind of foundational book to read, as well as the LUMA system book, right? Making things better is a great resource to start to learn about the system of using design methods.
So absolutely, thank you for that, Terri. That's great information, and we'll try to link those books or actually list them in the chat as well so that our attendees will have that as a resource. So with human-centered design, some of these skills sometimes get framed as soft skills. So this is another question from one of our attendees, that the skills get framed as soft skills, fluff and nice to haves, but not necessarily necessary, right, to get the job done. And in saying that, sometimes women get framed that way too. So how do you overcome that and try to beat that stigma? So I'll jump into, let's see, who haven't we heard? Let's jump back to Ashley.
I'm gonna raise my hand on that one. I think it's such an interesting and thoughtful question, Carissa. And I will say, as someone who has always kind of naturally had those soft skills, I've realized over the years, I also internalized that there's no value in those soft skills, like market value. I'll be more explicit. Like, nobody's gonna pay me to make sure that in this group, everyone knows where the bathrooms are. Right? But like, that's what I do. I always make sure we know where we are. We have our name tags, right? Like, nobody's going to pay for that. And I've worked very hard over the years to unpack that and to like dismantle it as my own kind of limiting belief. But what made me jump at the question, Carissa, is I think the pandemic has absolutely demonstrated that that belief is false, because there was the first few months where everyone was running around like a chicken with our heads cut off. Like, what are we doing? We can't possibly like focus on work, let alone do work. And then at some point it shifted, and people, clients, organizations, teams started realizing we still have to move forward with these decisions. We still have to make work. We have to do things. And so in my experience, the demand for these so-called soft skills is now really out, through the roof. I think that more and more people, to Hannah's point, that, the people who are able to be the magicians, right? Who are able to convene these conversations, women or not, if you're able to do it, this is a skill that's in demand. And I encourage everyone to learn it and practice it, because there's real financial value here, as well as actual value delivered through the course of the work.
And I think, just to build on that, I think we're building on top of each other, Ashley, a lot, but that notion of the soft skills. So what I find in these situations, and I saw in the chat that there was a question of how we pair Zoom with design thinking. So that's probably a whole other topic. But Zoom has this beautiful breakout room feature that allows us to create more intimate spaces. So you can do the 20-person meeting, but have people working in groups of 4 or 5, which is optimal for this type of work, and give them, using virtual whiteboards, a part of the board they can work on. There's a lot that we can do. But what I wanted to say is this question of the soft skill, it may be perceived as a soft skill, but what I find is when we're confident in our ability to facilitate an exercise or a meeting, and we give kind and clear instructions, all the chickens fall in line. Everybody got an A, wanted to get an A at school. Everybody does what they say, what you ask them to do. There's very little delinquency. There's a lot of order in the work. And so we can be perceived as kind and capable, but we get the job done because we are able to command that respect and show that expertise and have people follow along and do their work. And at the end of it, they're very proud of what they've done. So everybody gets a car. But I think I don't see design thinking as a soft skill at all. I think it's a super, almost technical skill of the ability to figure out what you pair with what and what comes next and how long you do something for. And the only way to learn is to make your own mistakes and to expect to get egg on your face many, many times as you build your own skill. You can't watch, it's almost like you can't sit when you sit in the passenger seat of a car ride somewhere and it's complicated and then all of a sudden you've got to drive, you're gonna have to get lost because that's the only way to learn. So it's a commitment, but once you cross to the other side, there's wonder.
I love that, Hannah. I think that's excellent point. It definitely, I have not seen it as a soft skill either, more so, but to Ashley's point, all of the skills that people do identify as soft have been unbelievably necessary, right, during this time of pandemic. So to lighten it a little bit, if you could think back and have an opportunity to speak to your younger self or any young woman in the workplace, what advice would you give and why? And so I'll kind of just go around to each person and give you an opportunity. So let's start with Aubrey.
Thanks, Carissa. I actually love this question. I first would explain what I kind of said earlier, where design is a very versatile word. So you don't have to be a designer to design. And this is speaking to myself who, went to school for architecture and really loved design in general. I grew up with a lot of sketching, and I had known I was going to go into some type of design field. But as I learned more about design being able to be applied to processes or systems, I think just it's helped me realize how versatile it is, and that I can apply design to the lives of everyone in different ways. And then I would encourage my younger self or someone stepping out of that world to work on building empathy for people outside of their purview. So if you think you've designed something that's just right on your own, the chances are you haven't. So seek out those different perspectives and take what you have designed to the next level to really make a greater impact. And I think lastly, I might suggest, promoting, I would suggest promoting the ideas of other women. I think, early on, it felt like a competition to be the better woman, because everyone was really just trying to grasp the spotlight in some way. So just finding ways to lift each other up and help each other get that seat at the table, like I said earlier, and how perspectives of women could significantly change the outcome. And actually, I know I brought this up yesterday during a conversation we were having, but I have to say it again because it's on my mind. There's a short interview that I found the link to, so I'm going to share this in the chat, but it's "What Would a City Designed by Women Be Like?" And it's through BBC. So I'm going to encourage everyone to listen to it. You don't have to know anything about architecture to understand the value behind the woman's perspective in this video, but it really sums up the importance behind women in design for me. So I'm gonna get that link and I'll share it in a minute.
Thank you. Excellent points. Let's jump over to Terri.
All right. Yeah, I also love this question. I'm like, okay, younger Terri. I really feel like I had a good young life for sure. And so I'm looking at this from a perspective of, okay, how would I, what would I recommend or suggest to a young person, or what are the things that I did as a young person that were useful? And so as it relates to design, I would say, be curious, right? Ask a lot of questions, right? And curiosity happens, I think, not just in a classroom. So get outside of the four walls of the classroom and learn in life. So that's something that I really value as a part of my life earlier on. Is after undergrad, I went to Europe for 6 months. I lived in Europe, and it was just out of curiosity. I've never lived here before. I don't know what to do. And this really helped me to kind of lead this creative, more design-centered life. So I would definitely suggest getting out in the world, exploring, being curious. And I think that helped me to be like a better design thinker, because we talk a lot about what's really important is having these broader perspectives. So having people in your network that are from all over the world, and having different kinds of conversations, and really just understanding how different cultures think is an important part of, I think, living a more curious and design-centered life. So when I do talk to young folks, we start to have those kinds of conversations. And I think maybe lastly, but being a lifelong learner. I really don't consider myself an expert. I don't like the word expert, but because you stop learning. But being a lifelong learner, having a beginner's mindset is another design kind of practice that has been of value to me. So always learning new things, being open-minded for sure.
Absolutely. Ashley, any feedback on that one?
Oh gosh, I'm just like, I'm taking notes for my future self. Like, you know, I need to remember all of these things. I guess I have two. This is a bit of like a build upon, right? So I was thinking about it as I was watching my husband recently doing research on, this is random, but doing research on mowers, like lawn mowers, and what's the best kind of lawn mower. And I watched him like sit and research and agonize over like really, you know, what's the right choice on this lawnmower. And it got me thinking about how I think as we grow into adulthood, a lot of life seems like what's the right answer, like trying to figure out the answer to that question, whether it's a lawnmower or like what's the right job or what should our team work towards next. So much of this is, like I said, ambiguous, right? So like, if I could give advice to younger women, my younger self, anyone in this field who wants to get into this field, just to first trust and know that there is no one right answer. And your job is to continue, like Terri said, to continue being a lifelong learner, continuing to be curious, and come up with your right answer, right? So that's the first one. The second is some advice my mom has always given me that I think lines up very nicely here, and that is to get on the bus. So for my whole life, my mom has been saying, Ashley, you've just got to get on the bus. You can always change your seat later. And I think that lines up really nicely in human-centered design with our value, our approach around prototyping and iteration, right? You don't have to know the end result when you start, you just have to get going. So whatever that looks like for you in your career, in your work, with your team, whatever it might be, whatever challenge you're tackling, just get on the bus, give it a try. And like my mom says, you can always change your seat later.
I like that. Get on the bus. I like that. Hannah, what would you say to your
well,
young self?
I think we all have our own paths as we get older. We're learning different lessons. Most of my career, I was in management consulting, and I did strategy consulting and organizational design, and even though I was perceived to be successful at what I was doing, I didn't feel like I had clear expertise. And so for me, developing expertise has been a game changer, and actually being the one person in the room or in the meeting who deeply knows how to do something. So I would recommend to people, if and when you find something that you really care about and you feel gels well with who you are and what you want to do, go deep and become really, really good at it. So that's one, and it's taken me a long time, I'm old now, to actually figure that piece of it out. And I think the other piece that I would encourage myself to think about is to not allow people to block my path as much as I feel like I did in my past. Those of us who worked in multinational corporations, and there's hierarchies and there's bosses, and sometimes, unfortunately, the women can be less kind than the men, who will make sure that we're not moving forward or bringing our interests into our work. And I can remember many years of trying to work around blockages or just collapsing under the weight of them. And in the economy and the way that the world is working right now, and there are even some estimates that say as many of 60% of us will be working as independent freelancers by 2040, there's so much more freedom. If we have our skill set, if we know how to use the technology to put our work out there, we can do the kind of work we enjoy doing, we're good at doing, with people who appreciate it. And that model of, just like a film is made where a producer and a director and the actors come together and they create this beautiful thing, and then they go on and they do something with different people feels a lot more like a world that could work for somebody like me who can no longer tolerate the blockages.
Understood. That is a very insightful. Caitlin, to round it out.
Yeah, sure. So similar to the kind of get on the bus message, I was lucky to have parents who would always encourage me to try stuff. So I sold water filtration systems one time. I was a wedding planner, an event planner. I worked at a film festival. So I've been kind of a bit of a mutt since I was 18. And I've always enjoyed that and learned a lot from that. I think it gave me a chance to try out a lot of things and understand what I'm good at. 20 years later, I think I'm finally asking myself the question, what do I want to do? Like, what do I enjoy? What do I like? So if I were talking to myself 20 years ago, I would say, also be noticing what you enjoy, like what fills you up and what fulfills you, rather than just, what am I good at? Where can I fill a hole, right? Because I think a lot of times, especially now, I'm kind of quick to be like, sure, there's a need, I'll fill it. But stopping to ask myself, is that gonna feed me as much as, as I feed it?
Absolutely. That, I think all of that is, each one of you give such insightful and such purposeful advice. I'll round that out by saying one of the themes that I've heard going around is really continue to be curious, become lifelong learners, or continue to be a lifelong learner. And to me, that speaks to don't assimilate, right? We as women, or if I had to speak to my younger self, I probably would say, don't assimilate, don't necessarily become part of the matrix, be able to follow your passion and follow your purpose. So that's definitely insightful and what I grabbed from what each one of you has said. So we have a question from our attendees. So this question is, design thinkers who tend to fall mostly in the demographic of white males, people may feel like they have empathy with people who, and we're not sure, right? If there's a value add from the design thinking perspective, is there a value add of DEI? So this question states, what they don't see is the particularity of social identity groups and how this impacts dynamics. Do you have any thoughts on this? So particularly as it centers around DEI and the current world of design thinking, and probably adding to that, how do we diversify the professionals who are in this industry? So any volunteers to take that first question? It's a loaded question, I know.
It is a very loaded question.
It's a loaded question.
It's actually just making me think of something that I've encountered in the past, and maybe I'll speak to that experience a little bit. I think, around the I guess dominant personalities is what I'm thinking of. I've seen that come out a lot on, especially, now that we're in a more virtual world. I think it can be difficult to hear a woman's voice over a man's voice on a call. So I think someone mentioned earlier, whenever we were using Zoom, being able to use breakout rooms to get into smaller groups of people. You can kind of pick and choose who would be in those breakout rooms to make sure that there's not going to be one person who's dominating the conversation, and using the methods to make it feel like every stakeholder has a voice in what is happening. I know that it doesn't fully answer the question around like how you can get them to feel like they have the empathy to listen to those comments and the feedback from their peers. But if you're able to break it out into groups and then present in smaller groups, I think you'll kind of hear more of those voices. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but so I don't know if anyone else has something similar that has happened to them.
Absolutely.
I think just you're highlighting, Aubrey, the levers we have as if we're facilitating this work, the levers we have to adjust some of those dynamics and ideally kind of counter what might be in the room, right? Or try to kind of use what we can around the activity to promote diversity. That makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I was trying to think of, okay, which part, this is a loaded question, which part can I contribute to here? So I'll mention that one of the things that was, I don't know, noticeable to me is that design feels very exclusive, right? It feels like, you know, folks that have on the black turtleneck are the ones that design is for. And however, that's not the mindset of design. That's not the practices and principles, but design is really for everyone. And I think that's part of the message that we need to, as designers and non-designers, understand that design is for everyone, no matter whether you're a traditional designer or you are, you know, or if you are, right, you're someone who's trying to solve problems differently. So I think that helps for sure. It's just to look at design as it being available to everyone and not just exclusive to this particular group of people. It can feel that way.
Absolutely. So I'm going to do a quick lightning round question as we move towards the end of our conversation. So with all of you being familiar with LUMA methods, what is the one method from the LUMA system that you could absolutely not live without? So I will start in my upper left corner, that's Caitlin. So I'll go and I'll work my way around.
Don't even need to think about it. Abstraction laddering.
Okay, can you?
The reason is because I think, as we talked about ambiguity and complicated challenges, abstraction laddering starts to create some layers of problems and sizes of problems and some structure around that. So that's certainly one of my favorites. I think the one we can't live without.
Perfect, thank you. I like that. Hannah, what would you say?
Oh, this is a super, super unfair question. So this, I'm not going to necessarily answer that, but I will say that the one behind me that I used with my family was actually round robin, which I think works really well to move people forward without making it a too big a deal of the discussion that you need to have. So this was a family decision we needed to make. And when the page was done, we were done. And there's a certain amount of novelty and enjoyment that comes with it. And it works really, really well in mural. You can do remarkable things with a lot of people with round robin and mural. So it's become a new favorite.
Perfect. Ashley, what would you say?
This is a toughie, but the first one that comes to mind is what's on your radar, which is a method that helps you understand what's on someone else's radar. What do they care about? Or perhaps even what's on your own radar. What do you care about? I think one of the absolute superpowers of human-centered design is making our work visual, and particularly getting out of our head and putting it on paper so that we can see it in front of it and then do something about it. And so whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed or I want someone else to help me understand why they're feeling overwhelmed, we head over to what's on your radar.
I like it. Terri, what's your favorite method?
I'm looking on the wall at my importance difficulty matrix, the one that we used when I had my son. We felt definitely overwhelmed, and we listed out all the items that needed to happen before he was born, and it helped me to feel calm. And it's also where I learned that a nursery is a luxury. It fell in the upper left-hand corner. They don't need it to live, but they need food and a shelter. So importance difficulty matrix.
Absolutely. And closing us out, Aubrey.
Yeah, so this is really hard, by the way. There are so many great methods. I think that I most often use affinity clustering, so I can identify key themes across a bunch of different stakeholders. But I usually pair that with rose, thorn, bud to understand like where are their problems. I know that that's kind of two methods, but I think the both of them are just such a great pair, and I use it all the time. So that would probably be mine.
And this is why we have recipes, and this is why we create.
And you don't put on any weight if you eat all of them in the recipe.
Exactly. Good point. Good point. So I'd just like to thank all of you for joining us, and thank all of our attendees for joining us today. We're right around the 4 o'clock hour. So thank you for joining us for the How Might We event. We are looking forward to having many more of these and being able to share with everyone. Please, for attendees, please follow us on LUMA. Please follow LUMA on our social media channels to learn about any future events that we are having. You can visit us at luma-institute.com. So it's luma-institute.com to learn about anything that we do offer. And please feel free to go ahead and email us at community@luma-institute.com anytime. So we look forward to seeing you again. Have a great day and keep making things better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.